Hello and welcome to Smart Money Results. With political and societal changes comes great opportunities. We invite you to check out some of our best investment ideas at smartmoneyresults.com/win. And now to talk to us about the raging vaping crisis and the misguided government actions against a viable industry is Cameron Ray, a customer service manager at a leading vape shop and an advocate for alternative smoking solutions. Cameron, thank you for taking the time to share your thoughts with us at Smart Money Results.
Thank you for having me, Josh.
Well, we want to do something a little bit different with this interview because you have so many opinions about the vaping crisis, as we discussed in the pre-interview session. But I do want to ask, first of all, at the time of this interview, the CDC has confirmed that there are 34 deaths allegedly linked to vaping with over 1,600 illnesses. As a result, several states have banned vaping to various degrees, and even President Trump has weighed on the matter, proposing a federal ban on flavored vape products. However, these incidences are but a small fraction of the millions who vape in this country. What is the government getting wrong here?
So that is a very good question. So they are jumping the gun here on a issue that really does need to be addressed, but they are going about this in the incorrect way. What needs to be broken down here is an illegal black market where people are getting these kinds of products that are leading to these kinds of injuries here. If things were more regulated, like every other industry out there, we wouldn't be having these issues. If we're getting, American-made products that are vetted through million-dollar clean rooms where there's no possibility of contamination or anything like that, then we're not going to be having these issues. But going and jumping one step ahead and targeting an entire industry that is not directly tied to this outbreak, that is where we're going wrong here.
Yeah, it's amazing to me that we have had ample history to reference regarding prohibition and acts similar to prohibition. And we know that anytime government tries to ban a certain substance or ban or try to mold, I guess I should say, a certain behavior, it always fails. And yet here we are again. It must be incredibly frustrating for you, right? I mean, with you making your living in the vaping industry, could you talk to us about the frustrations that your industry is experiencing right now?
No, absolutely. I mean, without our customer base, we wouldn't be where we are today.
Right.
And that's ultimately what I really do look at. First and foremost, the thing that is really affecting our customer base. Once these kinds of, laws started popping up, I was getting calls daily, people concerned. This is the way that I stopped smoking cigarettes. What am I going to do now? Am I supposed to go back at this point? Go back 20 years of all this progress that I've made just to regress? And that's what I really think is hurting us the most is, potentially letting down our customers that really do depend on this product as a safer alternative to combustible cigarettes.
Is it safe to say that that you've noticed a dramatic shift between customers who are just calling in to place an order versus customers who are sort of freaked out of their minds because of the cons? I mean, there was a time, remember, in late September to mid October, where every single day there was some kind of sensational headline about vaping and somebody dying, thousands of illnesses. Was the shift palpable in terms of you fielding these types of calls?
No, absolutely. As soon as these, laws and scare articles started popping up, it was a dramatic shift in the kinds of calls that we were getting. No longer was it this, cheery atmosphere of just placing an order for a customer or anything like that. It was just about every single call, a customer freaking out that they're not going to be able to, buy the products any longer based on their state or based on these health reports. They're scared to use them now. So absolutely, I did see a shift there.
And if I understand correctly, you yourself used to smoke combustible cigarettes on a pretty frequent basis. Is that correct? And then,
yes, that is correct.
And then you used these vaporizer products to wean yourself off of combustible cigarettes. So since that time, have you ever used a combustible cigarette or felt the desire to do so?
Well, I mean, the craving is always going to be there. It's always going to be an addiction to that nicotine. But no, I do not smoke combustible cigarettes. Fortunately, I have not bought a pack since I quit. I'm very happy about that. I am getting the nicotine that I need out of vaping. So I really do not have any desire to switch back.
I think there's another problem with the vaping crisis is that there seems to be a big misunderstanding between so for example, right now the biggest topic is the Juul vaporizer that's been on the news constantly, and there's a difference between that, right, with the Juul e-cigarette versus the type of vaporizers that you yourself primarily sell to your customers. Could you share a little bit about what the main differences are?
Yeah, so when it comes to a Juul, you are basically relegated to a pre-filled cartridge. If you happen to be one of many, I would assume, that tend to get this from a black market source, whether that be also containing THC, or, if this is just a, easy loop around to buying it from a store. I could see black market cartridges floating around there. And of course, they're pre-filled. You're not really going to know what you're getting out of it. On the other hand, what we do is we sell every single component of a vaporizer. That is a tank, coils, the mod itself that fires the device, batteries, and of course, liquid. So, with a standard starter kit, you get pretty much all of the above there, with the exception of the liquid there. So you are yourself administering your own liquid of your choosing, whether that be a tobacco flavor or a fruit flavor or a dessert flavor, in the nicotine strength that you desire, and you yourself are doing that every time that you need to fill your tank. So those are the two main differences. There is absolutely no sort of customization or real fiddling with it with a Juul, and then there is total and absolute control with a mod.
And with the Juul, from my research, I understand that their products typically come pre-filled from the manufacturer, and so the correct usage of the Juul should be to vape the liquid that's in that pre-filled container and toss it when you're done with it. It seems to me though that with teen vaping, that most of the teens, the underage users, are using Juul, and yet they're the ones getting sick from it. It seems to me that they're modifying the vaporizer to modifying in a way that it's not recommended either by the manufacturer or inputting illegal substances. Is that where you think some of the blame lies in this so-called vaping crisis?
I mean, absolutely. If there's a big enough demand for a black market, the black market will emerge. There's no real way around that. And I can't say for certain. I have heard, I haven't personally done this myself, I do not want to take any sort of credit for this. I have heard that people are able to, with enough fiddling, open up those cartridges, and there has the potential to fill whatever you really want in there, whether that be strictly a nicotine substance, which is all that we would recommend, or more nefarious purposes, black market THC substances.
Yeah, here's the from what I understand, and this is the thing that bothers me most about this situation is you don't find vaping related illnesses in other countries, right? At least from my analysis, I have not seen maybe an isolated case in Canada, but other than that, all of these cases are right here in the U.S. You don't find the vaping crisis occurring in the UK or in Japan or in other Western European countries. It's just simply not there. I was wondering, in your opinion, why do you think this is an American phenomenon?
That is a really good question, and I don't really know if I exactly have the answer to that. Again, as I mentioned before, if there is a big enough demand for a black market, the black market will emerge. I think that is more than likely what this really boils down to. Other countries have a lot more restrictive drug laws than, say, we do when it comes to, like, marijuana. So the demand has never really been there, I would say, in certain foreign countries. But for a country that now is pushing towards full-on legalization, at least in my lifetime, I would imagine that would end up happening. I think these states that are slowly warming up to the idea and or still are very staunchly against it, that's where a lot of these cases are emerging. They're people within those states that want the benefits that other states have, and because there's a demand for that, a black market will emerge. And that is where I ultimately feel where most of these issues are coming from.
And ironically, the government bans the state and the proposed federal ban for vaping products to stop the vaping crisis will only exacerbate the vaping illnesses, right? Because even the CDC, I believe they recently came out with the fact with a couple of findings. I think they're still both the CDC and the FDA are still looking for the main culprit, but from the research or from the recent reports that they've issued, they've come across a few patterns or facts about the vaping crisis. One of which is that THC is prevalent, is one of the most prevalent materials within these cases, and most of the vaping illness cases are young men. We're talking, I think, a median age of definitely less than 30, but probably I think somewhere around the early 20s. About 22-year-old male is the predominant the predominant suspect, if you will, in terms of the profile, the average profile of the vaping illness. I mean, doesn't that say something about say something about the real cause of the vaping illness? Because we talked about this briefly during the pre-interview, but you mentioned you get a pretty broad spectrum of people, right, that call in for vaping products. It's not just always guys or always women. It's a pretty diverse range of people, and I think you also mentioned even within the age group, you have some very old people calling in, as well as some young folks that just turned 18 or 20 or 21, whatever the legal age is for that state. So you have such diversity in terms of the real demand, and yet the illnesses are really only affecting young males. Doesn't that suggest, or does that suggest to you that we're dealing more with a behavioral issue rather than a platform issue?
Once again, another good question. I don't know if I'm necessarily qualified to answer that. That's the thing. As more and more of these studies do come out, yes, there does seem to be a very large male demographic. A lot of the symptoms are introduced or mainly shown in younger males. But when it comes to these death tolls, it tends to actually be more on the older side that ends up actually having these, reported deaths here. So, I mean, the spectrum is incredibly broad when it comes to the age of all of these individuals. And I again, cannot say if that is necessarily just a purely male-dominant thing, because we do deal with customers of, all genders. So to say that there is even a 50-50 split or a 60-40 split, I wouldn't even know about that, at least from the customers that I deal with on a daily basis.
Yeah, it seems the reason I ask, because typically young males more risk, they tend to engage in more risky behaviors. And it would seem to me, especially with modification of the Juul vaporizer, or with putting in illegal substances, that would more or less cater toward the young male user. Because from the reports that have come out, and even the CDC just recently confirmed this, that there is, while the usage is broad, the illness cases, according to the CDC, suggest that there's more of a bias toward young males, and it made me at least suspect that we're dealing more with a behavioral issue as opposed to a platform issue. But I think that being said, I think the bigger issue is that, I'm personally, I'm not a vape user. I've never really found the whole smoking idea to be attractive, and yet I'm for small government. I'm for government to just handle the things that they do, protect the American people. But other than that, there's really no need for them to get involved. And do you find that among your customers that they're becoming a little bit more politically active? I don't know if that's the right phrase, but more interested in the advocacy side of politics, especially because we have a government now that's, because the government nobody talked about vaping until, a few, folks started to use the devices illegally, and they started dropping dead. Has that inspired any sort of political advocacy among either your customers or the people in the industry?
Oh, absolutely. Especially when it comes to our customer base, since this is really affecting them directly. They're the ones that are, at the most risk here. Not us necessarily, but they are. Because otherwise, like I said, 20 plus years of progress, quitting cigarettes and staying off of them, or however long that they've been, off cigarettes, more power to them. But they're the ones directly affected by this. So, from the get-go, once these news stories started getting published, we're getting calls from customers, emails from customers that are writing their local governor, trying to fight this, telling them how much this has changed their life and how devastating this would be if they were to, cut this source off for them.
So earlier, I sent you a file that I worked on where I listed the incidence rates of the vaping illnesses and deaths. And over the past few weeks, it looks like the that rate of incidents occurring has definitely flatlined. And I was wondering if in recent days that you've noticed some of the pressure being taken off of either from your company or from the industry itself?
No, it definitely does seem to be that people are now becoming a little bit more educated as to what the main root cause is. That is being black market THC cartridges, which as soon as that news came out, first mention of black market THC cartridges, I knew that was going to be the root cause. So now that we have that as an established source, being the main root cause here, I feel that the black market is now being brought down a little bit because people are now worrying about their own personal health. So they're now weighing their life over a quick high. Personally, I choose life. So I feel like that is one of the reasons why that is going down finally. And I have noticed a petering off of calls as well, in direct correlation to worries and concerns about e-liquid and things like that, now that this information is coming to light.
Still, I think, and this is going to be my last question or last idea that I'd like to pose to you, but it seems like such a waste, at least from a lay observer's perspective, that there was this rush to judgment. And so many businesses, because you look at a state like Massachusetts, there's tons and tons of mom and pops who were selling these vaporizer products that had to store away their inventory, and they had to go out of business simply because of this unnecessary hysteria. And now it seems like, the CDC is saying, okay, we did some research, we did some investigative work, and it turns out maybe it's more to do with illegal substances, maybe it's more to do with black markets, as opposed to the vaporizer platform, the legal, proper vaporizer platform, which has been, I think, around for at least 10 years. And during that 10 years, nobody was dropping dead until a few folks decided to go black market. A few folks decided to use the product illegally. Is there a general frustration among the industry, among people who make a living from the vaping industry, that this was all unnecessary? Yeah, okay, it's great that we're starting to be a fact-based, that the framework is now fact-based, but shouldn't the framework have started as fact-based without action? Because what ended up happening was people actually got hurt, right? People actually got hurt. You personally got hurt. There's so many people that got freaked out, but on the worst end of the scale, there's so many folks that lost their businesses, that lost their livelihoods, because those small businesses hired people to work in their companies, and now that revenue stream, that employment is gone. It just seems like such a waste, and I don't know what's going on right at this minute with Massachusetts, but I guess the governor's still fighting it. Is there just an overriding feeling that this was all just an unnecessary headwind for you guys?
Oh, no, absolutely. This has been a huge frustration for us. There hasn't been any sort of direct correlation from the get-go that this has anything to do with the e-liquid that basically fuels our industry. Something that is just propylene glycol, vegetable glycerin, flavoring, and nicotine, if you so choose. There's been no information coming to light that this has any sort of correlation to this, and we're just kind of a scapegoat as a blanket demonization for the entire industry just because we sell vaporizers, not for the intended use that's being used here, but we're getting, blamed for this as well. And it is incredibly annoying and frustrating. And my heart goes out to all the states that had to close shop. I can only imagine what they're going through right now.
Yeah, just before I let you go, I just had a thought is that even if you're not a vaporizer user, I think this is really an issue that affects all of us, right? Because it's not about vaping or not vaping. It's really about this big government that's coming in and determining whether or not you should vape or not. And I think that if you personally want to vape, that's your call, right? I mean, if you want to smoke or vape or use CBD, I mean, it's really none of my business so long as you don't, go out and kill people because of it. I mean, as long as you use the product in the privacy of your own home and you're not impacting other people, I don't see any justification. I think this really should be an issue for all of us, right?
No, absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, Cameron, this has been a very interesting conversation, and I did deliberately want to make it an open discussion because I could come up to you with all these facts and statistics, but I think it really serves us all to put a human face on this vaping crisis, and it really is. My heart does go out to you guys. You guys are trying to make an honest buck, and suddenly big government comes in and says no to vaping, and yet they're saying yes to combustible cigarettes. It really makes no sense, and this is just something that our audience knows all too well. Just the government encroachment. Anytime government gets involved in anything, it's always a disaster. And I sincerely hope that this will be written in the history books as a modern day prohibition that again did not work. Cameron Ray, thank you so much for being with us at Smart Money Results.
Thank you for having me.